Medical Log, Cycle 372, Research Vessel, Stella Seeker, Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Ethan Holt. Recording, one of the most intriguing parts of being the Chief Medical Officer on an advanced research vessel is seeing the countless ways various species can manage to injure themselves. And believe me, they find every possible way to do it. At the moment, I'm standing in what can easily be considered the most cutting-edge medical bay in the entire United Galactic Federation's research fleet, surrounded by technology that could probably reassemble a Zolothian from a single scale. The medbay gleams with that iconic sterile shine, a look that often makes other species assume we're showing off. But honestly, we're not. It's just that some of us can literally melt if we come into contact with the wrong kind of bacteria. Yes, I'm talking about you. Flixari Collective of Sector 7. Computer, pause recording. Note: don't forget to delete informal observations before submitting to Central Medical. Resume recording. Today's focus is on studying the comparative healing rates of various sentient species. The holographic display in front of me shows a rather impressive array of data, if I do say so myself. Did you know that an Araqual can regenerate an entire limb in less than 3 standard cycles? Impressive, until you see how they do it. They regenerate about as gracefully as a drunk Silmarian trying to solve quantum physics. Their new limbs often come out at odd angles, and sometimes with extra joints. I once observed an Araqual warrior who had regrown his arm 7 times. The result was something like a walking abstract art piece, but I digress. Computer, mark previous paragraph for deletion. Maintaining professionalism is important. The real challenge in this research is figuring out why some species have such powerful healing capabilities, while others, well, let's just say my own species, the Trelkian, would treat a paper cut as a major medical emergency. I'm not exaggerating. Our cellular structure is so fragile that even a small tear in the skin can spiral into complete systemic failure if not treated within minutes. That's why every Trelkian individual carries a personal medical field generator on them at all times. Right now, I'm analyzing a tissue sample from a Zarathian warrior. Their healing ability is remarkable, although not nearly as efficient as they claim in their recruitment ads. The cellular regeneration happening under my microscope is fascinating, though I'd be more impressed if I hadn't just finished studying the rather extraordinary case of warning alert. Atmospheric pressure variance detected. Counterseal Medical Bay 3 and adjust pressure gradients. I instruct my secondary respiratory membrane to flutter in irritation. This marks the 3rd time today that the environmental systems have malfunctioned. Captain Lucas Pierce insists it's because we're testing a new quantum drive core, but between you and me, I suspect our engineering chief has been meddling with the systems again. Speaking of engineering, they recently requisitioned an entirely unreasonable amount of emergency medical supplies. Apparently, they're preparing for the arrival of our first Terran crew member. The list includes everything from synthetic skin grafts to organ printing matrices. Completely unnecessary if you ask me. I've reviewed the Terran medical files. On paper, their healing capabilities seem rather ordinary. Computer, remind me to review Terran physiological parameters before their arrival. The central diagnostic unit of the medical bay hums quietly, processing the day's data. Around me, the automated medical drones glide effortlessly through the air, their pristine white exteriors reflecting the soft blue lighting. Each one contains enough technology to perform emergency surgery on 97% of known species. As for the remaining 3%? Well, that's why we have the quarantine chamber with its specialized exotic particle manipulation field. Dr. Olivia Pierce, my ever-enthusiastic research assistant, steps through the sterilization field at the entrance, her sensor stalks practically twitching with excitement. "Chief Medical Officer," she bubbles, quite literally. Her species communicates through controlled gas emissions. The preliminary results from the Zentharan tissue regeneration study are in, and you won't believe the correlation we found with their exposure to solar cycles. I suppress a tired vibration. Olivia is brilliant, but sometimes I feel like she'd get overly excited about discovering a new kind of medical tape. Actually, no, I'm being unfair. She did get excited about that new adhesive last week. Before she can launch into what would undoubtedly be a fascinating lecture on cellular meiosis rates, the ship-wide comm system crackles to life. Attention, all senior staff. Our Terran crew member will be arriving ahead of schedule. Please prepare for their integration procedures within the next 2 cycles. I glance around my immaculate medical bay, with its quantum-locked surgical units and cutting-edge neurological reconstruction chambers, and I can't help but think that perhaps we might be just a tiny bit overprepared for one Terran. Oh, how terribly wrong I was about to be. Medical log, cycle 372, continued. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Ethan Holt recording. Have you ever witnessed the slow-motion shattering of a Zolothian ice crystal? That perfect, surreal moment when everything you thought you knew about molecular structure just unravels? That's exactly how I felt when Ryan Carter walked into my medical bay for his mandatory arrival screening. First, he simply walked in. No protective field, no atmospheric stabilizer, no genetic degradation prevention unit. He strolled through the door as if he were entering a maintenance bay, whistling a tune that made my auditory membranes vibrate uncomfortably. "So, Doc," he said, and I had to double-check my universal translator for a malfunction. "Ready for my checkup or whatever." Olivia, bless her gaseous heart, couldn't help herself and started releasing a stream of stress bubbles. "Sir, please remain still, the quarantine field." "Oh, that blue shimmer thing." Ryan scratched his head, actually rubbing his skin with his keratin protrusions. "Yeah, I walked through it. It was pretty tingly, kind of like when your foot falls asleep. You know the feeling?" No, we didn't know. The quarantine field was designed to completely sterilize and molecularly reconstruct any organic material passing through it. At the very least, it should have been excruciatingly painful. I made a note to check the field's calibration. I managed to keep my professional demeanor intact as I motioned for him to take a seat on the diagnostic platform, our most advanced medical exam unit capable of mapping quantum-level cellular activity. Ryan glanced at it, gave a casual shrug, and hopped up onto the platform without hesitation, completely disregarding the safety restraints that hadn't even activated yet. He swung his legs back and forth like a Terran perpetual motion machine. "This going to take long?" he asked. "Engineering's got this brand new quantum core they want me to look at." Olivia's sensor stalks twisted in nervous knots. "Sir, please remain still for the molecular scan." "The what now?" He was already standing up, strolling around the platform and inspecting its underside. "Hey, this is pretty cool. We had something like this back on Sidon Station, but it was way more cumbersome. You guys really fine-tuned the quantum mapping array, huh?" I felt my primary cardiovascular SAC contract. He could recognize quantum engineering configurations just by sight. This laborer, Mr. Carter. I tried again. "We need to establish your baseline physiological parameters for our medical database. It's standard procedure for all new crew members." "Yeah, sure thing," he replied breezily. "But, you guys got all our medical records from Earth Central, right? Should be pretty standard Terran stuff." Standard Terran stuff. I pulled up his species file on my datapad and gave it a closer look for the first time. The numbers had seemed unremarkable before, but now, watching him breezily flout about 17 different safety protocols just by existing, Mr. Carter, I began. "According to this, your species regularly endures forces that would liquefy my internal organs." He laughed. Ha! He was now hanging upside down off the diagnostic platform, seemingly testing its weight capacity. "Oh, you mean like G-forces and stuff? Yeah, we're pretty tough. Had to be, evolving on a death world and all that." "Death world," he said it like he was talking about the weather. Olivia could no longer hold back. "But your cellular structure, the extreme pressure your cardiovascular system withstands, the constant regeneration of your skin cells, the electric currents running through your nervous system all the time, how do you not just explode?" Ryan laughed again, the sound triggering 3 separate medical alarms. "That's just how we're built, I guess." He shrugged. "Hey, speaking of built, I think your quantum diagnostic system's power coupling is slightly off. Mind if I take a look?" I nearly screamed. All 4 of my emergency vocal sacs deployed at once. "Do not touch that. That is highly calibrated medical equipment." By now, he'd already popped open a panel I didn't even know existed and was elbow deep in its quantum matrix. "See? You've got a slight phase variance in the tertiary array," he said nonchalantly. "No wonder your readings were all out of whack." There was a sound, one that should have marked the catastrophic failure of an incredibly expensive piece of equipment, one worth more than some small planetary systems. Instead, the diagnostic platform's efficiency rating suddenly spiked by 12%. "There we go," he said, sliding out from under the platform, his hands covered in some kind of black residue. "Should work a lot better now. So are we done here? I really want to check out that quantum core." I turned to Olivia. Her sensor stalks had gone completely rigid, a sign of either extreme shock or, in her species, recent death. "I suppose we can finish the baseline scan later once the equipment has recalibrated," I said, trying to recover my composure. "Cool, cool," he said, unfazed. "Oh hey, do you guys have real coffee on this ship? Not that synthetic stuff?" Olivia's voice was faint. "The psychoactive stimulant brew, the one classified as a controlled substance in 7 sectors? Yeah, can't start a shift without it. Well, I mean I can, but why would I want to?" As I watched him practically bounce out of the medical bay, I did something incredibly unprofessional. I switched to our native language without the translator. "Olivia," I bubbled softly, "update the medical emergency protocols, all of them, and requisition some of that coffee. Something tells me we're going to need to understand how it affects Terran physiology." "Already done," she replied. "I've also started a new research file titled Terran Physiological Anomalies and Violations of Known Physical Laws." "Good thinking," I muttered, though somehow I doubt one file will be enough. The medical bay's automated systems were still processing the data they'd just scanned. 3 diagnostic units were stuck in recursive self-checks, unable to believe their own readings. Somewhere above us, a Terran was likely about to revolutionize our engineering department's understanding of quantum mechanics. I needed a drink, something far stronger than coffee. Medical log, cycle 372, emergency entry. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Ethan Holt, recording. "You know how sometimes you just know your day is about to get infinitely worse?" That's exactly how I felt when the emergency alert blared through the Stella Seeker, specifically from engineering, and even more specifically, from the section where our newly arrived Terran had been optimizing our quantum drive core. Medical Emergency in Engineering Section 7. Multiple casualties. Terran involved. I was already moving before the announcement even finished. My medical response team was right behind me, their tentacles weighed down by every piece of emergency equipment we had. The fact that I had to specify that the equipment was rated for Terran physiological extremes should have been my first clue about how badly this situation would unfold. The scene that greeted us in engineering was, well, picture a Phosgren demolition derby colliding with a quantum physics symposium. The drive core housing had a hole in it, a hole in containment-grade quantum crystalline housing. Exotic particles were still sparking through the air, turning various non-essential equipment into bizarre colors that, technically, shouldn't exist in our dimension. 3 of our engineering crew were huddled in safety bubbles, their personal medical field shields glowing at full intensity. Chief Engineer Benjamin Stone was literally vibrating with anxiety, all 7 of his safety protocols engaged simultaneously. And there, in the center of it all, stood Ryan Carter, or, as he currently was, impaled Ryan Carter, was pinned to the deck by a 3-meter-long, quantum-infused drive shaft that had speared him straight through the torso. Let me clarify that for you. A quantum-infused drive shaft had speared him right through the chest. "Hey, Doc," he greeted me casually, waving while impaled. "Bit of an accident here. Don't suppose you've got a bandage or something?" Olivia, who had followed me into the room, immediately fainted. Her emergency suspension field was the only thing keeping her gaseous form from dispersing entirely. "A bandage?" I said, my speech sacs engaging in shock. "Mr. Carter, you have a quantum-charged piece of equipment through your chest." He glanced down at the drive shaft, almost as if he was just noticing it. "Oh yeah, that's not great, but, I think it missed the important stuff. I can still breathe, which is a good sign, right?" Chief Engineer Benjamin Stone, after taking a moment to process, finally managed to speak. "The quantum field, it should have. Your molecular structure, it should be. How are you even still coherent?" Ryan, without missing a beat, shrugged, while a drive shaft was lodged through him. Terrans are pretty tough, though. It's starting to sting a bit now. Maybe we should do something about it." The quantum field alone should have scrambled his entire nervous system. The physical trauma should have induced immediate shock. The molecular disruption should have... Right, I thought, falling back on my training because nothing about this made sense. Right. We need to get you to surgery immediately. The quantum field could be causing massive cellular damage. Nah, that's okay, Ryan interrupted, reaching down to grab the shaft. I think if we just don't move it. At that moment, everyone conscious in the room screamed at once. Too late. With a grunt and a movement that's going to haunt my stress nightmares for cycles, Ryan yanked the drive shaft out of himself. He pulled it out. The quantum field discharge alone knocked out power to half the deck. There we go, he said casually, tossing the drive shaft aside like it was a tool he used every day. Now, about that bandage? I stood frozen, watching my medical scanner generate readings that would likely rewrite several textbooks. His tissue was actively regenerating itself. No medical intervention, no cellular stabilization, no quantum field neutralization, just healing at a rate that defied everything I knew. Herp, Ryan muttered, glancing at his torn uniform and the wound that should have been fatal for any other known species. Guess it went through my favorite shirt. Annoying. Oh, and I should probably mention I might need a tetanus shot. Not sure what the protocol is for quantum drive shaft punctures. That's when Captain Lucas Pierce arrived. He took one look at the scene and did something I'd never seen him do before. He cursed in 3 different languages simultaneously. Rodriguez, he finally managed, his voice a mix of disbelief and frustration. How? What? Why are you not dead? Oh, hey, Captain, Ryan said, casually wiping off some fluid, half his own blood, half quantum coolant, off his uniform. Sorry about the drive shaft. Good news, though. I figured out why the quantum efficiency was off. Bad news. He motioned to the hole in the drive housing. The maintenance access could use some redesigning. I got my medical scanner working after it cycled through 3 diagnostic self-checks, refusing to believe the readings it was picking up. This is... I started, then had to pause and reset. Mr. Carter, you've suffered what should have been a fatal quantum mechanical injury. Severe physical trauma, complete cellular disruption. Yeah. He nodded nonchalantly, prodding the rapidly healing wound with his fingers. Probably gonna leave a scar. My sister's gonna be jealous. She's got regular scars, nothing quantum. Olivia, who had regained consciousness, was now furiously scribbling notes. Her sensor stalks were whirling with excitement. The Terran's cellular regeneration rate under quantum influenced the neural stability. Despite dimensional disruptions, the sheer biological impossibility of this, she muttered, her voice tinged with awe. Captain Lucas Pierce sighed deeply. The sheer amount of paperwork this is going to require. I noticed Ryan was starting to look a little paler. Well, paler than his usual color. Mr. Carter, I said firmly, my professional voice making a reappearance. While your durability is extraordinary, I must insist you come to the medical bay for observation. At the very least, we need to ensure there are no quantum particles lodged in your tissue. Yeah, okay, he agreed way too casually for someone who should have been extremely dead. But can we make a stop by the mess hall first? Getting impaled really works up an appetite. And that's when Olivia fainted again. In that moment, I made 3 decisions. I was going to need an entirely new classification system for Terran medical emergencies. All of our safety protocols were utterly inadequate for Terran durability. I desperately needed to understand how these beings evolved and why their homeworld hadn't simply imploded from their presence. Also, as we helped him toward the medical bay, Ryan added, "Don't suppose anyone's got a spare shirt? Medical log, cycle 372, emergency treatment record, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Ethan Holt recording. If you've never seen a medical bay in full emergency response mode, imagine a perfectly choreographed dance where everyone knows exactly what they're doing. Now imagine that same dance happening while someone keeps changing the music. The stage is on fire, and all the dancers are having existential crises. Repair the quantum field neutralizer, I called out as we rushed Ryan into the medical bay. Olivia, initiate the molecular stabilization sequence. Get the tissue regeneration chamber online. Can I get that coffee first? Ryan asked, his voice annoyingly casual as he walked alongside us, ignoring our attempts to get him onto a hover gurney. Maybe like a Band-Aid or something. A what? Olivia's sensor stalks twisted in confusion as she rushed past, weighed down by an armful of advanced medical gear. You know, a Band-Aid, he said, making a vague gesture toward his torso, where the massive wound was already healing at an alarming rate. Maybe a couple of them. This wound's a bit bigger than usual. 3 medical drones zoomed past overhead, their sensors likely in a state of panic, unable to process the Terran physiological readings. One of them even stopped mid-air and had to reboot itself. "Mr. Carter," I said, struggling to maintain my professional composure as I directed him toward our most advanced treatment platform. "You've suffered quantum mechanical trauma that would have reduced most species to atoms. We need to—" "Oh, hey, this is new," he interrupted, eyeing the quantum scanner with interest. "Did you upgrade this after I fixed the power coupling? The resolution's way better now." Olivia, practically shaking with scientific excitement, muttered, "The Terran remains coherent despite massive quantum exposure. Look at the cellular regeneration, the biochemical responses, the readings, impossible." A junior medical officer chirped from behind a console. The quantum variance alone should have resulted in total molecular dissolution. Ryan, who had finally agreed to sit on the treatment platform, though he refused to lie down, scratched his head. "I mean, it tingles a bit. Like really spicy food, you know?" Olivia's confusion nearly overtook her scientific curiosity. "You mean the chemical compounds humans deliberately consume?" "Yeah, kinda," Ryan said with a shrug. "Speaking of food, anyone else up for lunch after this? I'm starving." I had to take a moment to activate my personal calming field. "Mr. Carter, please focus. We need to neutralize any lingering quantum particles in your system before they cause a cascade failure in your cellular structure." "Nah, it's fine." He waved off my concern, casually disconnecting a molecular stabilizer. "Terran cells are pretty good at dealing with weird stuff. Did I ever tell you about the time I accidentally ate uranium?" The medical drone above him sparked and had to be caught by an emergency field. "Uranium?" Olivia's voice shot up several octaves. "Well, not on purpose," Ryan said nonchalantly. "There was an incident at the Sidon mining facility, but I was fine after a couple of days. Had some fun side effects, though. My ex said I glowed in the dark for a week. I glanced at my medical scanner, then at the rapidly healing wound, and then back at the scanner. This defies every known law of biology, physics, and even common sense. Terran medical records show that injuries like this are typically treated with something called ibuprofen and walking it off. One of my assistants reported, clearly disturbed, I can't even begin to process these readings, Chief." Ryan nodded, grinning. "Yeah, ibuprofen would probably help. But I wouldn't mind some of that synthetic skin stuff you guys have. These quantum burns are kind of itchy." "Itchy?" I repeated, almost in disbelief. "The quantum burns are itchy?" Olivia, now completely disregarding any professional boundaries, was practically glued to Ryan, her sensors absorbing every detail. "The cellular regeneration rate is unprecedented. The neural adaptation to quantum exposure, the resilience of the digestive system, Terran biology must— Please, let me publish a paper on this." "Sure, why not?" Ryan agreed, then frowned at a particularly persistent medical drone trying to attach a molecular stabilizer. "But could we do it after lunch, and maybe get me a new shirt? This one's got a pretty big hole in it." A new shirt? I felt like I was trapped in some sort of recursive loop. "You're worried about your shirt?" "Well, yeah," he said, as if it were the most logical thing in the world. "Can't walk around the ship like this. What would people think?" I glanced at the massive hole in his uniform, the rapidly healing wound beneath, and the error messages flashing on my scanner, getting more and more extreme. I said carefully, trying to keep my composure, "they'd think you survived an injury that should have turned you into a theoretical concept in quantum physics." "Hey, you should see what happened to the other guy," Ryan chuckled, then pointed at the quantum drive shaft still lodged in the wall. "We should probably get that fixed. Looks kind of dangerous sticking out like that." That's when Olivia, lost in her excitement, accidentally brushed against the quantum-charged section of his torn uniform. The resulting static discharge would have liquefied her sensory membranes, if not for her personal protection field. Instead of concern, Ryan looked intrigued. Cool, do that again! The colors were amazing! Perhaps, I suggested, feeling a headache develop in all three of my brain clusters, we should focus on completing at least basic decontamination protocols before any experiments? Oh, right, sorry, Ryan said, looking appropriately apologetic for about 2 seconds. But after that, lunch, and maybe someone can explain why everyone's so worked up. I mean, it's just a flesh wound. Just a flesh wound? I made a note to update our medical database, specifically the section on Terran idioms, with an addendum about their apparent infinite capacity for understatement. Yes, Mr. Carter, lunch after decontamination, I replied, then turned to my staff. Cancel the quantum regeneration procedures. Apparently we just need, what did you call it, a Band-Aid and coffee? He helpfully added, coffee fixes everything. Olivia, I whispered, still watching Ryan heal from an injury that violated every known law of physics. Should we tell him that coffee is classified as a Class Y molecular destabilizer in most systems? I whispered back, I'm not sure it matters anymore. Medical log, cycle 372, recovery observation. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Ethan Holt. Recording, hour 6 of observing Terran regenerative capabilities, and I'm starting to question everything I know about biology. Ryan Carter is sitting on the observation bed, munching on something he calls a sandwich. Yet another example of Terrans casually consuming substances that would dissolve most species' digestive systems, while his body casually rewrites the laws of cellular regeneration. Are you sure you don't feel any quantum displacement? Olivia asks for what feels like the 100th time, her sensor stalks practically tied in knots with excitement. No, Ryan answers through a mouthful of what I'm not sure is even food. Actually, I really don't want to know. But I've got this weird craving for spicy food. Think the quantum stuff might have charged up my taste buds or something. The medical monitors are still displaying readings that defy all known logic. According to the data, Ryan's cells aren't just healing, they're actually incorporating quantum particles into their structure. In any other species, this would call for immediate quarantine, and potentially even a ceremony for final rites. Fascinating, Olivia burbles, releasing a few excited gas bubbles. The Terran cellular structure is adapting to quantum exposure. This could completely change our understanding of biological resilience. Cool, Ryan says nonchalantly, finishing his sandwich. So can I get back to work now? Absolutely not, I respond sharply, though I'm slowly realizing the futility of enforcing any medical protocols on Terrans. We need to document your recovery process, for science, obviously. But I'm fine, he protests, demonstrating this by doing something called a push-up, right there on the medical bed. The display screens briefly flash into emergency mode before giving up entirely. Look, all healed up, he says, lifting his shirt to reveal his wound. I have to engage my tertiary optical filters to make sure I'm seeing this correctly. Where there should be catastrophic tissue damage, there's only a faint iridescent scar that occasionally sends out tiny quantum sparks. This is unprecedented, I mutter, scribbling yet another note in what is now less of a medical log and more of a chronicle of Terran impossibility. Your species continues to defy biology. Ryan grins. We just evolved on a planet that really wanted to kill us. Makes you tough, you know. Medical log, cycle 373, final report. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Ethan Holt, recording. The incident with Ryan Carter has completely altered our understanding of Terran physiology and ship safety protocols. Below are the key findings and resulting changes. All emergency classifications have been expanded to include a subcategory. Terran emergency, actual and Terran emergency, what Terrans consider an emergency. The difference is roughly the size of the gap between a quantum core breach and a mild headache. The engineering department has implemented a new hazard classification system, ranging from deadly to normal species to mildly inconvenient to a Terran. They've also requisitioned something called duct tape, after Ryan mentioned it's better than half their repair protocols. Olivia's research paper, Quantum Mechanical Trauma and the Terran Response, a study in biological impossibility, has been accepted for publication in the galaxy's leading medical journal. Initially, the peer review committee thought it was a work of fiction. The ship's AI has been reprogrammed to prevent catastrophic emergency protocols from triggering every time Ryan enters a hazardous area. The definition of hazardous has been substantially revised. Coffee has been reclassified from a Class 3 molecular destabilizer to essential Terran fuel, though we still have no idea how they drink it without causing their nervous systems to implode. However, the most significant change has been in the crew's attitude toward Terrans. Where once there was skepticism about these seemingly unremarkable bipeds, there is now a mixture of awe, fear, and resigned acceptance. Just yesterday, I overheard a junior engineer say, "If you want to know if something's really dangerous, watch the Terran. If they look concerned, run." As for Ryan, he remains blissfully oblivious to the seismic shift he's caused in our understanding of biology and physics. He's back helping engineering optimize the quantum drive core again, though this time they've at least implemented what he calls common-sense safety measures. Apparently that means keeping the pointy bits aimed away from people. Personal addendum to medical log. As I finish this report, Ryan just walked past my office whistling. Quantum sparks dance across his uniform, the scar from the incident glowing faintly blue, a color that technically exists in a dimension we haven't fully documented yet. Olivia has started a betting pool on what impossible feat Ryan will survive next. I've put my credits on accidental teleportation, though, knowing Terrans, they'd probably just call it a weird Tuesday and ask for a Band-Aid. The United Galactic Federation has requested a full report on Terran durability for their xenobiological database. I sent them the data, along with a recommendation to create an entirely new classification system just for Terrans. I suggested Deathworlders, but Ryan thinks Spicy Space Monkeys has a better ring to it. We've also installed coffee makers in every major section of the ship, partly for Ryan, and partly because the entire engineering team has developed a taste for it. We're still unsure if this is a security risk or an efficiency upgrade, possibly both. As for me, I've learned to stop trying to apply standard medical logic to Terrans. They're not just resilient, they're something entirely new in the galaxy's biological catalog. A species that doesn't just survive the universe's attempts to kill them, they thrive on it. Though I still maintain that no species should be able to treat quantum impalement as a minor inconvenience. Final note, medical supply requisition, standard medical supplies for all species, quantum field stabilizers, molecular regeneration units, 1 box of Band-Aids, Terran grade, coffee, classified as both a medical supply and hazardous material, additional medical scanners, previous units still displaying errors, Terran detected, end log. Yes, Ryan just popped his head in to ask if quantum-enhanced cellular regeneration counts as a pre-existing condition for his insurance. I'm going to need something much stronger than coffee to answer that one.